Hi everyone, as explained in the comments, we've reached more than 10 subscribers for this new YouTube channel. And as promised, I will explain and detail this moving head. So here we go for a first presentation of the mechanical part of the moving head. So here's the little baby in 3D. So this was designed with Fusion 360. I do recommend this software because it is designed by Autodesk and they distribute personal license. They call this license startup license. So that's a good thing because it's legal and free. That being said, here's an overview of the moving head. At the moment you cannot see the electronic parts inside. Electronic parts are not shown at the moment, neither the LED. And nor the heatsink. I'm currently working on an upgraded version. So in this video I'm gonna explain how it was designed and how it works. So at first we're gonna start by the main part, which for me is this one. So this part was designed to hold the LED and the heatsink. So the heatsink I've chosen is kind of processor heatsink, so it's a square shape, and the LED will be a screw on this heatsink. The LED emits its light, which of course is going through this hole. And on this new revision I've added a thread here. The purpose of this thread is to allow to use lens holder, and by screwing and unscrewing to adjust the distance between the LED and the lens. It's very common design. So this will allow to adjust the beam to make it more narrow or wider. This will also have an impact on the mix of the colors from the LED. On the left side you can see an axis here. So on this left part you can see here a cylinder shape, which purpose is to fit inside a bearing, the inner part of the bearing. This will allow to create a pivot link. And on the right side here we're gonna show kind of a rectangular shape to fit the motor axis in. So now let's talk about the motor. So the shape of the motor axis is kind of rectangular, and as you can understand, of course, the motor is used to actuate the pivot of the LED on one of the axes. So now I will show the bearing here. So now here you have a motor holder which allows to attach the motor to the chassis. And on the other side it's quite the same. This part is here to hold the bearing. So the bearing is inserted by force, and that's a nice way to hold it. You don't need to glue it. So now here we have a heatsink and LED holder and everything that's required to move on one of the axes. So we have this motor and this bearing, and now we're gonna place all of that on a kind of plate. But just prior to this here, as you can see, there's a hole which is here to allow the wires coming from the LED to go outside of the casing. The LED is RGBW, so it's a 4-color LED. So that's kind of quadruple LED, which means we will need we will need 8 wires from this LED to the electronic. So the wires will turn as you move the LED on this axis. So of course, as you can imagine, there is not infinite rotation available on this moving head. So here we have an extra part to make all this subset rigid. And as you can see, this extra part has an axis to allow rotation on the second axis of the moving head. This one is called the pan axis. The first one we've seen is the tilt axis. So the purpose of this part is to have a rotation like this. So we're going to use the same principle for the rotation as for the first one. We're going to use a bearing. So still the same, this part will fit in the inner ring of the bearing and ensure a proper rotation. I will hide a few parts so that we can see it better. So this bearing will be located here, and as you can observe here, there is a thread. So this thread will be used to receive a kind of cap which will hold the bearing in place. And so this way, even if you use the moving head upside down, this bearing will ensure that the first axis will not fall to the floor. So it's quite important. Because I like when the moving head are oriented upside down like this. I prefer this orientation. So as you understand, this is where this thread is very important. So now let's put the parts back in place here. The bearing will be located exactly here. And here, oh magic, you can see another thread. And oh, I just realized that I didn't show you the first cap for the second bearing. And here it is. So now let's get back to this small thread, and here we can use a nut to hold the first subset in place with respect to the bearing. So now the second bearing is held in place and the first subset is also held in place. Now let's talk about the plate. On the plate, as you can see here, we have a kind of path here. This path has been cut, or not really cut because it's really printed, but is removed from this plate. So the wires coming from the LED will move along this path as the moving head is rotating. And this way they can reach the inside of the moving head and reach, of course, the electronic boards. So the main body is placed just below this plate. And here you can see a hole to put the DC connector. And here we have a few digits here. And this allows to use a pen and write on one of the numbers to set a number to the moving head. For instance, if this one is a number 3, then you can use the pen to color number 3. This will be very visible that this moving head has this number. This will be used later for the DMX configuration. And then to close all that, we will use the bottom cover. And as you can see on this bottom cover, you can see some spacers which are integrated to this part. And on top of these spacers, we will place metallic spacers to hold the plate on top of it. So now if I put the main body back in place, okay, so now that's not very visible, so we'll try to use the section view to see it better. Okay, so it's probably much clearer this way. So yeah, that's a beautiful section view where you can see the whole design. So here you can see again the bearing held in place by the cap and by the plate. And the subset held in place by the nuts that you can see here. Now, what else can I say? Oh yes, of course, that's important. We have two motors, of course, one for each axis. So here on this axis you will see something that looks very familiar. It's a rectangular hole, as we've done for the first axis. So we'll use the exact same motor as for the first axis. So that's the motor for the pan axe. And we will hold it by a kind of spacer that I will do later. This will ensure that we have the correct spacing between the plate and the motor. So now I think you've seen most of it. I've detailed the two axes, the motors. So maybe we can discuss a little bit about the motors. Why did I choose these motors? At first because they're very cheap. You can find them on many cheap suppliers. They are simply the cheapest stepper motor I've found. They are probably €1 or €2 each. They are manufactured for a lot of customer appliance. If I am right, but I'm not sure, I think I've seen them in some air conditioning system and also some webcam probably. So as I've said, they're very cheap. If you do not use this particular motor, then the other motors are much more expensive. I think they will start from €4 to €5 for one unit. So that's a big step. So of course that's still a question of compromise, because you can use bigger stepper motor, you can move the moving head faster, but that will be more expensive. So with this smaller motor we will have of course some speed limitation, but I found that they are quite acceptable. So now let's look at the real parts, the 3D printed parts. So here's the LED holder, LED and heatsink holder. So here you can see the rectangular holes to place the motor axis. On the other side you will find the axis for the bearing. Here's the thread for the lens holder. Here on the back we can insert the heatsink. So here it is. So here's the heatsink. Yeah, it's kind of quite big heatsink, but we need that because the LED is quite powerful. So I had this heatsink in stock for many years, and I've designed the moving head around this heatsink. So here is how you assemble. Inside here you will find the LED. Now here's the part holding the bearing, and you can insert it this way. On the other side here is the motor holder. So once you've assembled all of that, you can see that it's moving on one of the axes like this. Then we use this extra part here and place it like this. And here we have a beautiful subset that can rotate on one of the axes. So then we will place all of that on this plate here that I will show. So here inside you can see the second bearing. And oh no, it's not specially placed by force. It's mostly held by the cap. Now I put this plate on the main body. And if I place the other part on top of it, here it is. Okay, and no magic here, you have the second axis working. I cannot add the bottom cover because I do not have enough ends. So I think we've done with this first mechanical presentation of the mini, very economical moving head. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to like, subscribe and comment if you enjoyed it. And of course, if you have some clever ideas to make it, or also a clever idea to make some change on the design, for sure feel free to comment. I'm sure there are clever ideas on mine. See you later, bye!